3 suspended Columbia graduate students are suing the university over its targeting of pro-Palestine protesters. And on this show, we're joined by 2 of those students and 1 of their lawyers. So we're joined by Catherine Elias Curran-Groome, who is a former master's student specializing in Palestine studies prior to her expulsion for organizing against the Columbia-funded Israeli genocide in Gaza. She lived in Palestine with her partner while working for a local mutual aid network. Welcome, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are also being joined by Brandon Murphy, who also was suspended. He's a master's student in social work at Columbia. He is passionate about connecting the struggles of the Palestinian people to those of all oppressed peoples in New York, especially Latinos and Mexican immigrants, given they are close to home for him as a Mexican. Welcome, Brandon.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining. And thirdly, we have joining us a lawyer, not just a lawyer, but one of the lawyers representing the 3 students, James Carlson, who is an attorney in private practice focusing on immigration and civil rights litigation. Welcome, James.
Katie, thank you so much for having me. Nice to be here.
Of course. So this is a kind of long saga, which I think requires that we go back in time a little bit. So before we even get to the lawsuit, let's just set the stage about what happened. And I think we have to start off with something that happened in January of 2024. There was a protest and basically a chemical spray attack. So Catherine, you were there at the time, right? Can you talk about what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually my first protest that I was participating in on campus after joining the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Coalition. It was a protest against the ongoing bombing of Gaza, our calls for Columbia to divest from the companies that were funding not only the genocide, but making the bombs that were dropping on Gaza. And we protested in the middle of January, shortly after the spring semester started. And partway through that protest, we were attacked by 2 Israeli soldiers who were students at the School of General Studies at Columbia. Those students attacked us with a chemical agent known as skunk spray, and myself and about 10 other students were hospitalized as a result of the skunk spray, and I and other students faced ongoing medical symptoms, mine lasting for over 5 months following the attack. Yet Columbia did nothing to support us, and on the contrary, actually rewarded the student who attacked us.
We have some photos of you in the hospital after the chemical spray attack. So here you are with a nebulizer, right? So can you explain why you had that?
Yeah, so I was admitted to the hospital twice following the skunk attack, and the first time was due to difficulties breathing. And they said in my diagnosis that I had experienced chemical exposure and that it had done temporary damage to my lungs. So I was given nebulizer treatments to help return my breathing to normal.
And we have another photo actually showing what the hospital said happened to you. So here we go. Here we see that it says you had the diagnosis was chemical exposure. Now, what is the claim of Columbia? How did they react to this chemical spray event?
Initially, they pretended it didn't happen. It wasn't until people like Leila Saliba, who was on the show, and others began to speak out publicly and call out the university for not only ignoring the fact that many of their students had been endangered and attacked on their own campus, but that they were actively seeking to suppress the story and not provide us with any means of support in terms of healthcare or otherwise. And so once Leila and other students started speaking out about this, Columbia responded by quietly suspending the 2 students. And then within a few months, they decided to not only reinstate those students, but to actually compensate one of them with a $400,000 payment after he admitted to attacking all of us on campus.
So he admitted to spraying students with some substance. His claim was that it was not a chemical spray, but it was some like novelty gag thing that you could buy on Amazon. And yet somehow whatever that spray was wound up sending people to the hospital where they were diagnosed with chemical exposure.
Exactly. And no evidence has ever been provided to support that claim. And also as someone who has spent many years in Palestine and has experienced skunk spray in Palestine, as it's regularly used by the Israeli occupation forces to suppress Palestinians in the streets, as well as to target homes through mass acts of repression. That substance, the smell of it, the effects of it are novel. It was created for exactly that purpose by the Israeli military, to be impossible to remove the odor, and it does have lasting health effects. And so to claim that it was some gag spray that you can buy on Amazon is quite absurd and can easily be disproven by the dozens of hospital records that myself and other students have stating that it was severe chemical exposure.
Next, we're going to go to another event. You were one of the organizers of an event at Columbia. And can you talk about what the response to that event was? Next, we're going to go to another event. You were one of the organizers of an event at Columbia. Can you talk about what the response to that event was?
Every year, campuses all across the globe, not just here in the US, engage in something called Israeli Apartheid Week or Palestine Solidarity Month. At Columbia, we were engaged in a Palestine Solidarity Month. We hosted, I believe, over 50 different political education events, varying in their topics. We did tatriz events where people learned how to do traditional stitches. And one of those events that we hosted that I was a part of was called Palestinian Resistance 101. It was a political education event talking about and contextualizing the many forms of Palestinian resistance, including armed resistance, and contextualizing that within international law and the rights of oppressed and occupied peoples to resist by any means necessary. And we submitted all of the proper event requests and approvals through Columbia University system. They never actually canceled the event or denied the event. They just asked us to move it off campus or to move it onto Zoom, which we did. We hosted it at an off-campus residence and had a Zoom option. And after the event, the university decided to not even engage those of us who were present at the event in a discussion, in any sort of dialogue, and instead sent private investigators to our residences unannounced who had ties and were former federal law enforcement officers, and then suspended us on the basis of actually using suspension as a coercive threat. They told us if we did not attend interrogations with these private investigators within 24 hours, we would not only be suspended, but myself and Aiden and 3 other students were evicted from our housing, lost access to our classes, lost access to for my campus job. There were all sorts of violations of our most basic human rights. And those basic human rights were essentially leveraged in order to try to force us into a interrogation with federal law enforcement officers.
You actually have an image that you shared with me of a private investigator showing up.
Yeah, this was at the door of another harassed student who had a Ring camera and actually documented the private investigator. So Columbia still has once again tried to erase so much of the harm they have done to us. And I think what they forget is that as students in the 21st century, we document everything. So we have receipts to prove every single claim that we have made in this lawsuit.
Brandon and Catherine, what has been the personal, political, professional fallout on you? Like, how have your suspensions changed your lives?
I mean, obviously it kind of completely turns your life around. I was a server at a fine dining type place, since I started as a student in my master's program in social work. And so luckily that was able to hold me over, and I was eventually able to get full time for that. But I had to just cobble together a plan to just survive. I had to move, and just all these chaotic life things kind of coming down at the same time. I lost my healthcare. I had to stop seeing my therapist. I had to just recraft so much of where my life was heading. I'm still in a position now of figuring out even where I stand with social work. Something that I think is one of the most just messed up things that came out of all of this is I was a school counselor at a school in the Bronx as part of my social work internship, basically my practicum internship. And I was seeing clients in the middle of the process of terminating the clients. These are all low income, immigrant people of color, kids of color, who a lot of them might not have any really supportive people in their life who they can talk to in this way. And when I'm suspended, that's just out the window. I can't talk to them at all. It's just been this perpetual limbo state, and then them throwing bureaucratic hurdle after bureaucratic hurdle and drawing you through this thing that's just kind of meant to try and break your will with no transparency, no due process, no clue about what's going to happen. And this is why I think this lawsuit is so important, because it's just taking a stand all right, you want to play ball, we'll play ball.
Wow. That's really awful, but I'm not surprised. I mean, why would they be concerned at all with those people whose lives you've touched, right?
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, though. I hope you are able to do social work. And what about you, Catherine?
Similar to Brendan, but also for me, I was evicted from my housing. That was the first most immediate impact that I faced. They gave me 24-hour notice to leave my apartment, which I had moved to Columbia just over a year ago from Palestine on the promise of a full scholarship to Columbia to pursue Palestine studies. I did not have any sort of backup plan other than returning to Palestine, which in the midst of a genocide, after being doxxed and facing the online targeting and harassment and reports to the FBI and the Israeli government, also endangers my ability to ever go back to Palestine and be with my partner there. And so that was one of the most painful, I would say, impacts of the suspension, was that Columbia loves to bring us in when our work can be relegated to solely the theoretical realm, when it can be treated as an academic exercise. But that is not what Palestine is for me, nor will it ever be. And so if I am reinstated, which is what this lawsuit is demanding, and which is what I hope for, it will have to be to pursue Palestine studies in its entirety. I'm not interested in my community or my loved ones being treated as some tokenized object that they can name an Edward Said program after. But then when we actually follow Said's legacy, we are criminalized, we are suspended, we are brutalized. So the eviction, the doxing, the loss of my ability to potentially ever return to Palestine were all really painful. The loss of my scholarship, which was the only way I was ever able to attend a university like Columbia. My scholarship was worth over $120,000, and Columbia revoked that, effectively expelling me, ensuring that I can never return to campus unless my scholarship is also reinstated. And I think also really, really painful for me was the loss of access to our community. They labeled me an outside agitator myself. I was the only student from Columbia to not have my charges dismissed. Columbia and the New York City DA's office decided to dismiss the charges of every other Columbia student who was inside Hins Hall. They said that I was not a student. And so I was alongside all of our other amazing outside agitators in the building. But while that part is funny to me, because I take no, I wear outside agitator as a badge of honor in that sense. It was deeply painful that I was, but that I was cut off from my entire community at Columbia. I'm not allowed on campus. I would receive trespass orders if I step on campus, or even into the residence buildings of my friends. And so what they've tried to do is single out a few of us, make an example out of us, exactly like they did in 1968 to the 4 students that were expelled then, and hope that that example is going to scare other students into not rising up and not continuing to protest and resist. And that is a failing strategy, as it always has been. And Columbia students continue to resist to this day. Removing us from campus has not stopped the organizing nor the resistance that's happening. And I think this spring is going to see sparks start to fly again, not just at Columbia, but we're already seeing it at Bowdoin. Student occupations are happening. They continue to happen. Students are creative. They are getting more and more creative with their tactics and their ways of protest every single day. And what they have done is just inflict immense, inhumane harm on those of us they tried to make an example out of. But it did not work to squash resistance nor protest. And so Columbia has done this to truly no benefit to anyone except for their bottom line. And that's a legacy they're going to have to live with. But I hope it's one that they can be held accountable for sooner rather than later. I wouldn't like to read 60 years from now that Columbia apologizes to the students of 2024 who were unjustly targeted. They need to be held accountable for that now, while repair can still be done to the immense damages it has caused for not just the 3 of us, but the hundreds of students that are still going through the disciplinary system. There are hundreds of students waiting for disciplinary sanctions from the first Solidarity encampment and Hins Hall, and those decisions could be coming out in the next weeks or month. And Columbia has not done right by us, but absolutely can do right by those students by dismissing their charges immediately.
Oh. And to the extent that you can share any of this, and I don't know if you can, but is your partner Palestinian? And to the extent you can share, what is your partner experiencing in Palestine now?
Yeah, my partner is in Palestine. I was able to return for a few months this summer, and since then have experienced even higher levels of doxing. So we're working to figure out whether or not I will ever be able to return, and what our path forward looks like. For him personally, I will say that he has grown up his entire life from the first Intifada to the second Intifada through today in one of the most severely restricted areas of historic Palestine. And to be honest, I think the thing that makes me still so proud to this day, and why I will never renounce nor apologize for a single act of protest I engaged in on that campus, is because when I went back to Palestine this summer, all of my friends and my community and my partner there told me how proud they were of us. And while I was in court for the Hinds Hall charges, they were all with me, cheering us all on. And if we did anything to that building occupation that made our people in Palestine who are resisting genocide every single day proud of their siblings in the US, then I stand by that 1000% and would do it all again.